What determines if a game is truly worth a $60 entry point on home consoles? I think this is a very interesting question in the wake of games like Kirby Star Allies coming out at $60, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee coming out later this year at $60 a pop, when these Pokemon games, at least of these kind of Pokemon games, have traditionally been $40 on 3DS and prior platforms. On top of that, there is Octopath Travelers coming out very, very soon that looks like an old school 90s RPG with a new perspective and a new look to it, but still very much looks like an old school game that is going to be costing $60. Now, I'm not questioning myself if the games are worth $60 to me personally, because at the end of the day, a game's value is going to be determined on an individual person's level. Let me give you an example. There are some people that have played Super Mario Run so much on their phone that they might argue they would be willing to spend $60 on it. So there is that individual, value to a game that cannot be determined on a case-by-case basis. At least when a company's looking at pricing games, they can't look at what an individual feels like. They have to look at what the greater whole is like and what they as a company think the game should be valued at. Now, when you look at games in that light, obviously the number one indicator that a game should be $60 is how much did it cost to make the game. This is something most of us never find out about. We have no idea how much it costs Breath of the Wild to make. We have no idea how much it costs the current Call of Duty game coming out to be made. We have no idea of the cost of Octopath Traveler or Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee or Kirby Star Allies. And that's the number one indicator of if a game should be valued at $60, I think, over anything else, is what it costs to make the game, regardless of if it's a 4-hour experience or a 100-hour experience, which I know a lot of gamers put value in that price tag on how long the game is, which I think, again, that arbitrary and subjective in opinion there. What isn't is the budget. So say they spent $100 million on a game and it's only 4 hours long, but it's $100 million. They're charging $60. And I think what's interesting here is one indicator of a $60 price tag being worthwhile is basically if the game is considered a AAA game. And I say this because, do people consider Pokemon AAA? Do they consider Mario Tennis Aces a AAA game at $60? Kirby Star Allies a AAA game? I mean, these games are all games that cost the same amount of money as a Breath of the Wild and a Super Mario Odyssey and a God of War and a Last of Us 2 and like all these other really epic experiences that clearly set the bar really high in the AAA industry. And here we have these other games that look, at least on the surface, like they're cheaper to make and yet still selling at that premium price. Now, we could argue in today's world, is that really the premium price with DLC and microtransactions and everything else? And a lot of those other games that are of those higher standards have the DLC practices and the microtransactions and all that stuff embedded in them. So they're really more than $60 anyways. But I digress. That $60 price point is still at least the entry point into these games, into many of them. And not every game that comes out is priced that way. There are still games that come out on home consoles that are at retail that are $50, that are $40, and that are $30, $20, $15. Usually when you get down to the $15 range, you're looking at more indie games that have gone physical. But even then, there are games that some people would presume are even AAA that come out at lower price points. And then you get into the remasters and the HD ports and all that stuff that sometimes are charged full price. Is that justifiable? And I'm all left wondering what the point of this is, because I'm picking up Octopath Travelers hopefully next week. I would love to get it on launch day. That's going to be a wait and see. And I'm left sitting here wondering, do I really have an answer to this? Do you guys have an answer to this? Because setting our individual values aside, I think, is important in this discussion, because a lot of that, again, is personal preference. As an example, I could tell you right now that I think Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee is definitely a $60 product. But does that mean that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon should have also been $60 even though it was on 3DS? it's an interesting thing when you think about it in that perspective, because they clearly spent just as much time on Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, or Sun and Moon, etc. as they're spending on this game, but this game costs $20 more just because it's on Switch, because that's the standard pricing of top-tier games on Switch is $60. So it's like that standard pricing range versus 3DS, where outside of the occasional $50 game, yes, there were some $50 games on 3DS, pretty much all games were $40. And you have to wonder, is because it's in HD really at that $20 value? I don't know. And I'm left kind of confused, because I definitely consider Pokemon to be a AAA franchise. I definitely don't consider it a B tier or a AA or even an indie style game, right? It's very much a top echelon franchise, a top echelon game, both sales wise, development wise, and money wise. But it's always been $40. What makes it worth that extra $20? Just the fact it's on Switch? And it's just a very interesting conundrum, man, because I'm going to be buying Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I'm going to be buying Octopath Traveler. I did buy Kirby Star Allies and Mario Tennis Aces, and I'm still left sitting here wondering what makes games worth $60. And it's a question I want to throw out to you guys, because I am conflicted on many fronts about this. I guess ultimately what makes something worth $60 is probably the thing I keep dismissing, and that's the individual valuation, because games are going to be worth what people are willing to pay. Ultimately, that's the way game pricing works. The way microtransaction pricing works, DLC works, etc. It is worth what people are willing to pay. You know, it's supply and demand, right? So if people are willing to pay $60 for Octopath Traveler, then it's worth $60. If people are willing to pay $60 for Pokemon, then it's worth $60. But is that really how the video game market works? Because a lot of these prices are determined before we know what people are even willing to pay in the first place. I don't know. Maybe that is why so many other games sink their values so quickly. You might see a game come out at $60, but a month later it's only costing $40. And that's because they overvalued what that game was worth. Gamers weren't willing to buy it at $60, but maybe they are at $40. And Nintendo games seem to be always in the opposite direction. We always seem so willing to buy Nintendo first-party games, or even second-party games, or even exclusive games like Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle or Octopath Traveler at these premium prices. Is it because we're accustomed to paying these prices? I don't really have a firm answer or a firm argument. It's more so a discussion I want to create with you guys. I presented some of this information. You guys can look at it and do what you think is appropriate with it, because I'm just really confused at this point on where I'm supposed to stand on this, because I'm just so used to paying $60 for games that I just don't even think about this, and I feel like maybe I should, especially as I've seen more and more arguments come out about how the new Pokemon games shouldn't be $60 and how Octopath Traveler shouldn't be $60, and I'm sitting there like, but I'm going to pay $60 and I'm going to love them. Does any of this even matter? You guys let me know down in the comments below. I'm Nathaniel Rufflechance from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do, and if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you in the next one.